And good morning, Hoosier Nation, and welcome to a victorious edition of Hoosier Morning After, albeit we are going to do a little different on this episode of Hoosier Morning After. This is Hoosier Morning After. Let's catch up. Lots of things have happened in Hoosier basketball since we last spoke, since we last had a show with y'all. And we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about some of the bad, but let's talk at least and start things on the good side and talk a little bit about the good. This episode comes immediately after Indiana wins against Sam Houston 97-71. Kind of an up and down start to this game, but to give the coaching staff some credit, and later we will talk a little bit, be a little bit harder on them. They made some adjustments that we've wanted, some adjustments that Martha has talked about on this show wanting. So some good adjustments that despite Sam Houston, bringing it close within 9 at one point of the game, IU's bench did step up big time in this game, scoring 36 points. Second half, IU kind of really took over the game to finish with the 26-point win on very close to doubling what the spread was in this game, really kind of helping to recover some in the metrics for IU after the large dip that it took after the Atlantis trip. And this wasn't a game that necessarily buries Atlantis and all the effects and all the missed opportunities that it created for IU and all the discourse and things that we will talk about later. But it does at least move the needle a little bit towards the positives, and there are some positives that I don't want to have overlooked out of this game. Thank you for being with me here. I'm your host, Chad Schwarzkopf. Martha having some technical difficulties this morning. We'll hop in whenever Martha can get things up and going. But again, I think this game, the biggest thing that I take away from this game, and you've seen a lot of guys analyze this already, and I'm going to shout out a few stats that some people did some deep dives on. But my biggest takeaway and hope for this coaching staff and what they learned in that adjustment that I talked about is the fact that they saw that how productive IU can be with that one big lineup, getting away from those two big lineups. Josh Poss on Twitter looked into the stats of that, and in the first half, Indiana led 29-9 at in the 9:41 mark with the one big lineup of either Renew or Ballo on the floor. Sam Houston led Indiana 16-13 with 10 minutes and 19 seconds of play with both Renew and Ballo on the floor. Additionally, in that time period as well, in the first half, 7 of IU's 9 turnovers in the first half were with the both bigs on the court. So you kind of saw that trend happening, and it was pretty obvious to you as well if you were watching as well. And on the final of the game, in 27 minutes and 9 seconds of the game with the one big on the court, Indiana was plus 34. And with 12 minutes and 51 seconds with the two big lineup on the floor, Sam Houston was plus 8. Now, again, single game stats like this can't be ignored, but they can't be given as the rule because there are going to be circumstances in these games, especially in the Big Ten, where two big lineup can work and can do some good things for Indiana. But you can't ignore this kind of situation as well. This is something that Martha's been barking up the tree about, and we've all kind of noticed. You can also look even deeper. Coach Adranya pulled out some stats of the different lineups, and the top 3 lineups in point per possession were single big lineups. Number 1 lineup, as far as going with just the one big, was with Rice, Leal, Renew, Tucker, and Goody. They were in for 11 possessions together, 19 points, and a 1.727 points per possession. So really great for that. And then number 2 was a lineup of Rice, Leal, Renew, Tucker, and Mbako at 1.571 points per possession. And finally, before you get to a 2 big lineup, was the third lineup of Leal, Tucker, Goody, Ballo, and Trey Galloway for 13 possessions, scoring 20 points and 1.538. Then you get to the very first big on 2 big lineup of Rice, Renew, Ballo, Mbako, and Galloway, which was the starting lineup since Carlisle was out. They played 22 possessions together, only 15 points, and a very bad 0.682 points per possession. So really kind of a thing that can't be ignored in this game, and something that was tweeted, that I tweeted myself to draw attention. And I do wish some of this was brought up a little bit more in the press conference with Coach Woodson after the game. Would love to hear his comments more specifically on this. Maybe we'll get this in the radio show later. We'll see in the following up game if this becomes more of a trend for IU when they kind of sit down and analyze the tape and see these numbers as well, because we know that they do like to look at things like this. So hopefully this is a trend going forward, because the way things just looked more open on the offensive side, it really looked stifled when we had the 2 bigs in there, despite Renew trying to play a little bit out and trying to be more of a 4. He truly isn't. He excels with his footwork and what he can do, being a back to the basket type of player. Now, he is slightly undersized for a big, but that allows IU to be more athletic. That is a very athletic lineup when you have Renew in there as the 5, and you're able to supplement that 4 with Goody or Mbako. It's really something that IU needs to continue this trend moving forward. Again, I understand from the business standpoint, and I hate that this has to be in the conversation nowadays with college basketball, but we did pay a lot of money for some bigs to get in there, so you got a sparse playtime and everything. But in the end, that's not the excuse. You got to win. You got to put in what's best for that game in that situation. And this is where, at least on this show, I will give the kudos to the coaching staff for doing that and putting them in positions to be able to get those things going for IU and get those players doing things a lot better for IU in those circumstances. The defensive side still had struggles to stop those straight line drives. It is something that has gotten aggravating with IU, with the athleticism and the abilities that a lot of these guys have for IU, to see them still struggle to guard those straight line drives. Some of that is miscommunications due to the opponent going for those false little drives that you will see. False screens, I should say, and then rolling off of that. But it is a little bit aggravating to see some of that defensive struggles. One thing I will give to the defense in on the flip side is a little bit more improvement from Atlantis in the overhelping on the shooters and that nail slot rim where they like to sag off. It was atrocious. That effort was atrocious in Atlantis. It looked a lot better in this game. Coming into a Sam Houston team that is top and as far as 3-point makes, we did hold them to a smaller effort in that sense. Now that we got Martha back, I want to go back to where I was just speaking on, because I know it's such a thing that Martha's been driving home. Martha, what you missed before you hopped in with us was talking about how IU finally went with something you've been hoping for and praying for, that 1 big lineup got an extended run in this game, and the stats show it, that the 1 big lineup was more successful. Your thoughts on that whole part of the game?
Yeah. And I, obviously I'm not alone. And I think in that sentiment, in terms of just for me, it's less Ballo and Renew on the court at the same time, right? And getting creative around that. I think especially when you've got a starting lineup of Ballo and Baco and Renew, that's a lot of size and a lot of lack of offensively. It's just you can't play your modern basketball. You can't get your guards moving like they need to. It just bogs you down. And I think that it affects Indiana both on the offensive and defensive end. It was almost like we, by default, by accident, got into a lineup against, I want to say it was Gonzaga, where you saw that first flash of holy cow, that looked pretty good there for a short spell. But then we went right away from it. And I understand that maybe the guards aren't playing like we thought they were. Certainly they weren't in Atlantis, right? They're struggling. Our two guards that we thought would come out and kind of carry us. I thought it would be a breakout stage for Miles Rice. It wasn't. So I think that certainly handicapped Indiana's ability to do some of that stuff. But still, I think they put themselves in such a rough position, especially defensively. I heard you speaking about just giving up. There were so many open looks, so many dribble drives to the basket that were open, and the nail rim slot defense and overhelping and not being in a position to help when the ball gets, passed to an open shooter. It was just, I think that lineup, that really big lineup affects that as well. So you want to see some changes. It's almost like you just wish you would have seen him before that stage in Atlantis. It's like, man, I wish we would have went there with a different game plan. But when we saw it, I thought Indiana looked better. They've got perimeter players, and I thought for a short spell, and certainly they looked better against Sam Houston. But you started to see some guys, the offense move a little bit better, the defense be able to respond a little bit better. So hopefully we see more of it moving forward.
Yeah, I think IU needs to move away right now. That too big lineup or that too big situation is kind of IU's default, and it's Woodson's default, and it needs to change from that. And hopefully we'll see that. And I think the contributions that we got from other guys that we'll start speaking of next, it kind of helped for that to happen and help those lines to happen. And I think the first one that we have to talk about is someone that carries over and from Atlantis, and at least how he was from a leadership standpoint off the court and everything, and to have a game like this. And obviously that's Luke Goody. You saw the videos and the talk from Atlantis. He was one of the guys that when chips were down and everything, you saw him in the huddles leading guys and pushing things, and always had his head up and looked like he wanted to fight and have that effort. Yes, in those games and up until this point, the ball just hasn't dropped for him, but it was great to finally see it get going for him. He finished with 18 points, 5 for 8 from the field, 5 for 7 from three-point line. Glory, hallelujah. Highest that he's had, a career high for him, 3 for 4 from the field in 17 minutes. So even a short minute standpoint as far as getting up those 18 points, great efficiency for him, but just great effort overall. And again, like I said, just carries over from how vocal we saw him in Atlantis, and great to see that leadership and that effort get rewarded. Your thoughts on Goody in this game and overall?
Obviously just a really cold start to the season shooting, but it wasn't, I mean, for me, it wasn't a concern. Like shoot. He's going to get through that slump. And I think the most impactful thing that I saw from Luke Goody over the past week was the scene of him in the huddle in Atlantis, being a leader, getting on his guys. And, there was a quote that came out after the Sam Houston game about what it means for him to play for Indiana and put on the candy stripes. And, he's a guy that not only grew up in the state, played high school basketball in the state, but he's got a lot of family that went to IU too. And the honest truth is it's different for him. And the challenge you have in this era of NIL and transfer portal and you're not always going to get guys that come in with that type of loyalty to the program. Does that mean they don't care? No, I don't mean that, but there's something to be said for that, right? There's a different pride you have when it means a lot to put on the Indiana name on your chest. And I'm not saying he's alone in that, but clearly it means a little bit something different right now to him. And does that mean Indiana can't achieve their goals? No, that doesn't. But you've got to get guys to play with that type of chip on their shoulder, that type of pride, because it didn't look like they were in Atlantis. It really looked like they were going through the motions. They looked unprepared. They looked slow. They looked out of shape. And I don't know how much of that actually exists, but certainly they did not look like they were ready to play basketball. And I think Luke was challenging them on that. And there's all sorts of rumors and chatter and cultural issues, and just there's going to be noise when Indiana struggles like they did there. And the truth's probably somewhere in the middle. But I think the most impressive thing about Luke is not only did he step up and lead, but he came back against Sam Houston, had the game that he did. He's a guy that cares, and he's a guy that if there is something that's going to happen positive this season, I think he's going to be a guy that helps carry Indiana through some of this stuff, right? Because there's a lot of noise right now, and they're going to need leadership like that. And so it's good to see him have that game, and it's even better to see him stand up as a leader.
Yeah, and I may be telegraphing this a little too much, but hit you, Martha, with one of those questions. Who do you think had the highest plus minus in this game, if you haven't looked already or know already?
Sorry, finding my mute button. Against Sam Houston?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Renew. I'm going to go with Renew.
It was Anthony Leal at a amazing and ridiculous 39 plus minus in just 25 minutes of play. It kind of transitions well to what you were just saying with having Goody, that kid that kind of buys in for the program, is going to give you that extra tick of effort. And in those 25 minutes, he does just score 4 points on just 2 shots, 2 for 2 from his free throws, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, no turnovers. There's just and there's an argument to be had about having too many scorers or too many players on the court at the same time and lacking that glue guy, lacking that guy that's just going to do those effort plays, going to have the right basketball IQ, the right just mentality and fight. And Leal showed that in this game and got probably some of the highest minutes we've seen for a while, at least. Obviously, maybe last year he had a few games like this when we were injury ridden, but just doing the right things on defense, staying engaged, being vocal, calling out switches. And his defense has gotten a lot better on the ball. Again, that used to be a concern for him in the past, but just great to see his mentality and what he brings on the court. And when you've got 2 guys out there, Goody and Leal, doing the right thing, it's fantastic. And Leal is known, obviously, to be able to hit some threes. If we can pepper in him taking a 3 or 2 into this as well, that's fantastic. That's icing on the cake, but love the minutes that he gave. Obviously, he got this run because of some injuries with having Gabe and Carlisle out. Hopefully that doesn't get stifled too much once those 2 are healthy again, because he does sit a little bit farther down the bench, but love what he brought in this game. Your kind of thoughts on Leal?
I read a stat somewhere, and I might butcher it a little bit, but when the stat was essentially when Anthony Leal plays over, I think 20 or 25 minutes in a game, Indiana has not lost, or either they haven't lost or their record is really, really good. And can't remember where I saw that. I'll try to pull it up and share it today. But essentially, and I didn't even realize it was kind of a quiet 25 plus minutes from but to your point, one of the biggest challenges of the Mike Woodson era is if somebody were to ask you, what is Indiana's identity? Is it tough defense? Is it good offense? Is it, I don't know that it's easy to answer that question. I certainly can't. I think for a lot of his tenure, they've been kind of identityless, and they've been trying to figure things out. And if this thing's going to end well, that's got to be fixed. And I think you've got some guys. I mean, you look at Leal, you look at Goody, you look at. I mean, there's a handful of even Renew at time. There's just a tough. There are guys that I think are tough on Indiana's basketball team, and it doesn't always translate to good defensive basketball or scrappiness on the court. But I think it could, and I think that's part of how Indiana can turn this thing around this season is get creative with lineups, play with some defensive toughness. It's going to create offense. But Leal's one of those guys that has been around forever, knows what it takes, can be in the right position at the right times, can help build momentum. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that like that stat was pretty revealing to me. And I've thought about some of the big shots he's made over his career. And it's true. It seems like good things happen when he's on the court. So I would love to see him, get a little more minutes. I think obviously with Luke playing a little bit better too. And you just don't know what's going to go on with some of these injury issues. But it's going to present some opportunities for guys to step up. And hopefully that means some better basketball and potentially playing a little bit tougher.
Yeah. Another person I think struggled, and I mean, you can talk about anyone that's not necessarily a big, but that struggled considerably in Atlantis, who we thought was going to really have a launching point in Atlantis was Miles Rice. And in this game as well, he kind of struggled in the first half, but had a great second half, made his last 7 shots, scored 15 in the second half. And I think a lot of that is due to the one big lineup. Gave him more space to drive underneath. When we had the 2 bigs in there, and even with Malik playing out around the perimeter, his defender was still sagging off of him and clogging up the lane for him. But beyond that, too, I think just seeing Goody get going and the way that had to draw in Goody's defender to be on him a little bit more opened up some space underneath. I think that also trickled over to Malik as well, flourishing in the one big lineup as well. But I think Miles Rice finally, at least some things clicked a little bit, and he was able to get downhill easier and just looked a little bit better. Any thoughts towards Rice, be it Atlantis or in this game?
Well, it's absolutely critical that we get Miles Rice playing some confident basketball. I mean, it was the honest truth. It was just a dismal performance by him in Atlantis. I think he was 4 for 25 over those 3 games, and you could see it. I think it started with the Louisville game, and and maybe you could point to who Indiana had played leading up to that point, and then going against a guy like Chucky Hepburn. That's a tall ask, but Miles Rice is good. We've talked about him to start the season as being a potentially all Big Ten guy. So a guy like Chucky Hepburn, I mean, that should be a challenge that he faces head on. And I'm not saying he didn't go into that thinking that he was going to have some success or anything like that, but clearly, when things started rough for him, it just kind of it just went downhill fast, right? And it carried over to the next 2 games, and over the course of those 3 games, it was just a rough performance, and to the point where it was almost a liability to have him on the court in Atlantis. And that was tough to see, because when you look ahead from a point guard standpoint and not sure what's going on with Carlisle, like Miles Rice is probably Indiana's most important player, in my opinion. And the importance of getting him some confidence, playing with some confidence. I think it was Brian Butch in the first half to start the game mentioned his body language. Some things were kind of carrying over, but it quickly changed, and he ended up he shot 7 for 8 in the second half against Sam Houston and scored 15 points in 17 minutes. And that's the Miles Rice we know. And the frustrating part is like, what, it's Sam Houston State. Like, where was this in Atlantis? Like, and we can beat the dead horse all we want about how we look against top 50 teams, especially without Trace Jackson Davis. I saw some just really eye-gouging stats about Indiana's record against top 50 teams and it wasn't even good with Trace, but what it looks like without Trace, and just our ability to no show against top competition, especially away from Assembly Hall, is just it's mind boggling, and it's concerning, and it's you just want to see Indiana show up in one of those games. And you think about it, you've traveled to some of them, Chad. You think about Vegas and Madison Square Garden and Atlantis, and insert neutral court setting, and Indiana has just looked really unprepared. And but those are games you need your point guard. They brought Miles Rice in for a reason. He's a talented guy. Hopefully that second half got him back on track, but we've got Big Ten play coming up. And if he disappears against some of this competition and is a shell of himself, got some concerns, right? Because the talent's there. So hopefully this second half was a platform for him to step up, regain his confidence, and be in a position to really have a strong season, here moving forward.
Yeah, and I think as far as I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but speaking on our bigs a little bit as well, and I think Malik also got settled into this game. I think he flourished when IU went to that one big lineup. He scored 18 points on this game, 7 for 10 from the field, 4 for 4 in his free throws, which is fantastic to see, because as we get into Big Ten play, he is going to get fouled with that great footwork and stuff that he has. Well, it was also good to see his 10 rebounds from him in this game as well. So 7 points in the first half, 11 in the second half. Nothing against Ballo, and love having him for IU, and he's going to become very big for IU in the coming Big Ten season when we go against other big guys, and the protection, as we have seen in some games, that he can give, even if he isn't blocking a lot of shots, is huge. One thing that did come to mind, at least when thinking about Ballo in this game and some of the games that I've seen so far, I kind of go back to some of the issues that we talked about last year when we got our other big coming in. His kind of conversation when he was at Oregon was about his motor and everything. And I hate to say that now, but I question Ballo's motor as it's going right now. I want to see his effort. He's not getting up and down the court as much. And granted, that's not in his repertoire. That's not what he was. He's always been that big guy, that lumbering big guy. But some questions that I have for him going forward. But overall, I'll flip and say Malik had a good game on his end. Your kind of thoughts on our bigs? I know that's kind of a loaded with two sides of the coin there.
That is a, it's tough, right? I mean, I agree with your sentiment 100%. As I thought across the board, we looked a little gassed. And I'm not going to go as far as to blame like there was chatter on social media about, our strength and conditioning coach and all this goofy stuff that we get into when, things go rough. Like, we're IU fans, we read way too much and all these conspiracy theories and what have you. But I thought a lot of the team looked out of shape and gassed in Atlantis, and that could go into preparation. That could go into, what happened the night, but it could go into a lot of things on the why there. Right. But I mean, when you look at a guy like Omar Ballo with his size and what he has to lumber with up and down the court, I mean, I imagine trying to keep that in shape. It's a big ask, and I think it could be look, you bring a guy like him in, and I think it's no secret on what he might be making from an NIL standpoint, and I think there might be this perception, okay, he's a guy that if that's our investment with him, he needs to be on the court as much as possible. I'm not saying that's the mindset, but it could be the mindset. And then you've got a guy like Malik Renew, who's been here for a few years now and has put up the points he's put up. Well, he needs to be on the court too. At some point, there needs to be an honest conversation about what's best, what gives us our best chance moving forward. And I feel like, it's one big at a time, right? I mean, it's just one of those guys at a time. Find a rotation, play matchups, do what you need to do. But unless we're playing against, Purdue with Zach Edey, which we're not going to be, you don't need those guys on the court at the same time. We We saw it in snapshots, but the team looks so much more fluid. It's modern basketball. It's modern basketball, and think about it from a long-term standpoint. I mean, no wonder you're having challenges recruiting wing players and guards to Indiana on a consistent basis. It's because you're playing ancient dinosaur basketball. I mean, it's not from a long-term standpoint, from it's just not conducive to long-term success. And hopefully we're getting to a point where we might see some changes there. And that was a loaded question. I could go on for days, but for time saving, I'll turn it back.
Well, yeah, and I think the hope in this is that we've been begging for this again, and we could beat this one big lineup discussion forever. And let's pull in Crimson Cast, let's pull in Assembly Call. We could do a dance marathon on this discussion, I feel like. But it's been just that. It's just been discussion. And I feel like we haven't had until this game, at least the game tape, the statistics, the other things to back that up, back that eye test discussion up. And I think it's going to take that kind of situation to get Woodson to take notice of that. And hopefully he does. Hopefully he's not too stubborn, knock on wood, like we know he can be, to not want to change that. But at least it's there in the tape. He's a Bobby Knight guy. Bobby Knight was known of being big into watching tape and analyzing tape. And if he is that Bobby Knight guy and is watching those tapes and looking at those tapes, he's got to be able to see this. He's got to see that this is something going forward. Do I think it's going to change the starting lineup? Maybe not. Does it hopefully mean that we shift from that starting lineup sooner? Yes. And that is kind of more of a thing to look out for. It'd be interesting to do a deep dive and look back and see when IU got away from the two bigs, and as far as time standpoint in the games, and to then track back to what that looks like moving forward for IU. But I think you will see the two big lineup for starting at least for a while. But hopefully this is a trend in the positives to see IU moving away from that as far as amount of minutes in a game. And things that are going to help shift that is to have games like Goody had. If he is shooting it well, it's hard to keep him off the court, doing the right things, and having him in there, you're going to want to go more of a one big lineup. Starting to look at some stats in this game. Obviously, one thing that was very tough in Atlantis and something that was a very big negative was the rebounding for IU. IU locked it in a little bit more on the glass in this game. Obviously, it was a focus in the practices leading up to this game, 37 rebounds. Turnovers, while high in the first half at 9, IU did clean it up in the second half with just 3 turnovers. Again, pointed to the stat earlier in the podcast when I mentioned that two big lineup was 7 turnovers. So just 3 turnovers in the one big lineup in the first half of those 9. 7 for 15 from 3. So that was a great stat to see in this game, 46%. IU still ranked up there as far as percentages in the nation. I'd have to look up to see exactly where we rank currently in that, but still on the lower end in the 200s as far as attempts per game. So hopefully we can go on the positive in that standing by moving forward. Any stats that stand out to you in this game, Martha?
I was going to mention the rebounding, obviously, just to be able to bounce back, from what I thought was a pretty dreadful performance in Atlantis. I thought, especially the defensive rebounding, improved significantly against Sam Houston. Again, we're going to want to see this, carry over to some of the Big Ten play. I was reading a stat, I think it was on Inside the Hall, but leaving Atlantis, Indiana was 292nd in the nation in defensive rebounding percentage. And after Sam Houston, they moved up to, I think, like 225 or something. So it was a good performance. But I didn't know there were 292 teams in Division I basketball. So that's a bit concerning, especially when you're starting two bigs. A bit sobering. So, those are some stats. Obviously, I had Miles Rice second half performance written down, and we talked a little bit about that. I still have some concern about Indiana's defense in the second half against Sam Houston. Yeah, we won by 26 points, but Sam Houston shot 60% against IU in the second half. We just happened to score the ball more. I still have concerns defensively. Even if you go back and watch against Providence, they missed a lot of open shots. And it just seems like teams are getting essentially whatever they want against us. Can that change? Sure. But if you get a team that's shooting hot, I have concerns. And part of it is that defensive style that we play of sagging back, that nail rim slot and over helping and not being in a position to, respond to your guy when he gets the ball. I've got concerns, and hopefully it doesn't lead to our downfall, but we've got to start playing better defensively.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe my stance and why I lean on the overly hopeful, and you can get on me for that, but I'm an IU fan. I lean deep down dreadful and have those fears like we all have and everything, and those trepidations. But on the surface, try to be hopeful as much as I can. And I think some of the deficiencies on defense are due to a lack of communication and the switching and new guys trying to figure things out together. I think where we saw the defense look a little bit better in this game was when you had more experienced guys like Leal in there, communicating better, doing things properly for IU. There have been a lot of possessions this season as well, and file this again under the hopeful side of me, where you see IU play really good defense for 20 seconds. And then the last 5 seconds, a switch happens or a rotation or someone sags into the paint a little bit too much and the ball rotates and we get off on our rotations and they get a point or heave a crazy basket. That was a standpoint in one of the early possessions in this game when the Sam Houston guard just kind of threw it at the basket and it went in. I think there are some of those, and I think those can be cleaned up, and those things can get better as this team plays more together and gets more practice time and more things figured out. And I think as well, again, circling back to what is becoming the theme of this show, I think a lot of it hinged as well when IU plays those two big lineups. And IU has tried to do a lot of switching, even with those two big lineups. You saw that in Atlantis when they played against Louisville. You'd get the mismatches on Ballo. You get those fast guards on Ballo, and then another guy would have to come over and help, and that would cause rotation problems. So I'm hopeful in that stance, I will say, but we will just see. We will see, and that is why things are in the social media climate for IU basketball, because it is a we'll see situation. And there is no definitive answer, either in the positive or the negative. There's evidence both ways. The jury is still out in these circumstances. And I guess we will shift to the tough part of this show, and we'll have to, I'm going to circle back to some stuff you were bringing up earlier, and that is Atlantis, and that is the question of identity for this team. Indiana is a basketball team that, despite in the past, if they have struggled, if they haven't had the offensive capabilities, has been a defensive team. That is not the identity of this team. 3-point scoring, is that the identity of this team? No, that's not quite there too. So this is a team lacking that identity, lacking that coat hanger thing. What do we hang our coat on? What is this going to be for this team? And we've got to find that. And from then, some positives can come. What are your thoughts on the identity of this team, and where can we find it, and what do you think it might be at the end of this season?
Well, first, I think just going back to, you kind of hit something that I think is important, and something that I value about this show, that it allows you to catch your breath a little bit, especially when the highs are highs and when the highs are high and the lows are low, right? This show allows you to kind of sleep on it, catch your breath, but you've always kind of led with hope and positivity, which I certainly appreciate, because that's not really the vibe around this program right now. Especially, obviously we can go back to how last season ended and chew on that. And when you lead into this season, it's like, well, prove it to me. It kind of felt like the mentality around the fan base. And then, you get into Atlantis and wasn't a whole lot proved. And it was a whole lot of fans saying, I told you so. Nothing's changed. And there's just a real vibe of, and I don't know if negativity is the word. Certainly there's some apathy, but I think just, we all love Indiana basketball, and, for different reasons. We grew up on it. We went, whatever your story may be, we all love it for different reasons. And I think continuing to have hope's not a bad thing. It's there's talent on this team. There's basketball minds around this team. You think about who's sitting on that bench and the careers they've had. It's an odd time. It just is. I think there's a lot of people just kind of thinking and hoping and waiting for this regime to end. There's some folks, I think, like you, Chad, that are continuing to lead with hope. We're 8 games into the season, whatever it may be. There's a lot of season left, right? Like, why are we giving up now? And then you've got a coach after the year that's got 3 years left on his tenure. Something's got to happen. Nobody goes out and recruits with 3 years left on a contract. You either get an extension or you're gone. So there's a lot of unknowns right now. And the biggest, to your point, is what's this team's identity? Because nobody can really put their finger on that. There's talent for days. Indiana's a program that has the ability to make investments essentially wherever they want, and identity should not be a problem. So that's got to get figured out. And I think part of it is creating lineups that put you in the best position to succeed defensively and offensively. Some changes have to happen there. That's going to help you create an identity. But it's tough to put your finger on what the identity is when there isn't one. But clearly, there can be one. And I just wish we'd move forward with some of these changes. I think it's going to allow us to play better offensively. Then all of a sudden, maybe our offense, maybe being a good perimeter scoring team is our identity, or maybe getting the ball up and down the court is our identity, or in a better position to play good defense. And all of a sudden we're playing tougher. It's easier to put a finger on an identity when you're playing winning basketball, and especially beating good teams. So hopefully we start to see some of that as the Big Ten season goes on, because right now it doesn't exist. And I think for the fan base in general, I wish more people would have your mindset of hope, and that's just going to take some wins at this point. So long ramble, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, and I think to slightly dip into the negative with maybe a little bit of positive is the only identity that I can try to drum up right now is just what this coaching staff has done is just the identity is deal with what you have or use what you got kind of thing. Because you think about when this staff first came into ownership of this team, what was the biggest positive was Trace Jackson Davis. And you kind of had to lean into him and everything had to run through him. Then he goes and they try to replace him with another big, and things go a little bit good with him. And we kind of, again, are running through him. And then, which he has a successful career at IU and then goes on to be a lottery pick and things are good. We reload with another big and we're trying to find that identity now. And we're just kind of clinging to that identity of what's our strength and how do we play to it, rather than this is our identity and this is what we are. And I think the juxtaposition, if you look just over to the football team, and Signetti came in and he had his identity and he molded the team he had and who he went and got to that identity. And again, I mean, I've got it here on my towel that I had from this game. And his identity was that fast, excuse me, I got one of these letters on here, fast, physical, relentless. That was the identity that he created for this team and came in with a football team. And I think that's where I struggle to find with this basketball team, and where I want to see an identity like that and be bullish with an identity. And it's only become even more clear, the lack of identity with what football has done. The other thing you impressed upon, and I sorry to keep the depression going a little bit on this show, is something that, as Jim kind of says, he said he tuned in a few minutes ago. Does it seem like the fan base is done with the current regime? Apathy, question mark. I felt it in the game on Tuesday. That's a tough spot where we are right now. And I think if you look at a lot of the noise on social media, you obviously have to take social media with a grain of salt, because as anything is with reviews and social media, the negative is going to be amplified a little bit more than the positive. But there is obviously, again, like I said, trepidation, and you see that apathy, and you saw it in the stands as far as a very half full looking Assembly Hall. And it's a tough spot to be in. And it's a fan base overall, like you said before, that travels to these big games. And we've put ourselves in these great big games. Like you said, I went to Vegas. I went out when the coaching staff was brand new to the Bahamas to see those international games. We've had those games like in New York and everything. And we've put ourselves on these big stages, and just continues to fall apart on these big stages and not travel. And it falls back to what we've said earlier. IU basketball is an alley-oop for a coach, is a clean line to a dunk, a windmill, do whatever you want to do with it. And what we have had in these past years, in these past coaching regimes, is akin to the Victor Oladipo Michigan alley-oop, the greatest dunk that never was. Just a setup for something that could just explode. And the fan base is ready to explode. We saw that on football. We've seen that this past year. And it does get aggravating, and it is frustrating to be in this standpoint. And I think I stem those emotions that I have from that standpoint with the fact that we still have a season to go. We have a lot of games to be played. And you can choose to look half full. You can choose to look half empty at that glass. And at least in this game, I see a little bit of half full with some of those Indiana guys stepping up and getting things going, and maybe the one big lineup finally clicking and being things moving forward. And I will choose to, like I said, lead with hope with that. And I implore you at listening to this podcast, I implore you to spread that hope and hopefully push on forward, because the complaining isn't going to do us any good at this point. It is going to just be a virus to the players that are out there right now, if they feel that negativity towards them, if they don't feel like we're fan base out there supporting them, because the coaching regime is not going to change right now. Because of the financial standpoint, because of how things are, where the contract stems, all that stuff. If you want to get into conspiracy theories with that, the Quinn Buckner Mafia that Woodson has supporting him, it's not going to change this season. I hate to say it, despite a complete crazy collapse and some miracle happening, it's not going to happen. So we need to be there supporting. I I don't know. That's a lot of rambling by me, Martha. Am I off base on this? Your thoughts on any of that? I don't know.
No, and I'll start. You started by holding up your towel from the football game. I want to mention I've got a new one for you from the bucket game that I'll send you that you can add to your collection because it would look good hanging up behind you as well. But I think on the football note, right? In their identity and coming in, it was clear as day as what their identity was going to be. And when you think about it, the model is pretty similar in terms of you think about all the new faces that Kurt Cignetti brought in via the portal and via NIL. And it kind of contradicts, I'll call them excuses, but it kind of contradicts Woody's reason for the slow starts, right? Is all the new faces. I don't think that excuse is landing really well. And, and back to football, right? I just think about it's noisy in the basketball world right now, but I think about how noisy it would be if Indiana football was struggling. Because normally everybody is turning their attention to Indiana basketball by early November, if not early October in some cases. So, a lot of people are resting their fandom on Indiana football right now and thankful that they're being successful, not really paying attention to Indiana basketball because they're struggling. So I'm thankful for that. But yeah, it's just, I think some of the argument is, especially in the off season where, we've all seen the Woody's cooking memes and he's killing it in the portal. Well, that's the easy part. That's the easy part. Like, and I've said it often, kind of joking along, but you and I could spend Indiana's resources and put a pretty strong team together. That's Indiana's not a tough sell in the transfer portal. It's just not. The real beef of the matter happens when the coaching starts, and I think that's the biggest struggle with folks right now is there hasn't been any changes. There's been limited success and no changes. And there shouldn't be this consistent hump that exists every season that we've got to get over. And it's a moving hump as the season moves, the hump still exists. And that's the challenge, right? It should not be this difficult, to your point, at Indiana. And that's going to be on the staff to figure out. There's way too much talent on that staff. First off, you think about guys like Calvert Chaney and Jordan Halls and I haven't even named a top assistant yet, but there's way too much invested in that staff. There's way too much talent on that staff for Indiana to be as stagnant as they are. And something's got to get figured out. But to your point, it's you think about all that said, right? The talent on the staff, the talent on the court, like what's the harm in hoping, right? I mean, because folks are going to be noisy. We can preach till we're red in the face and ask people to calm down, but there's, fan is short for fanatic. And when you're fanatic, you're fanatic with the highs, you're fanatic with the lows, and people are, and social media just gives people, and I'm as guilty as anyone, but it gives folks just that instant reaction where they're just going to say stupid stuff. And that's the era we're in. And it's going to be up to IU and the staff and the program to figure this out. But to your point, and it's what I appreciate about you, what's the harm in hoping? And because it's not like we're dealing with, a three-legged dog here. We've got a full machine here that's capable of making some noise. Let's just put some hope in the fact that they'll figure it out, and we'll play some good basketball here down the stretch.
Yep, keeping that kind of positive and keeping that hope alive. I know you probably got to get going to get your kid to school and stuff, but before you run off on us, Martha, tell us in these games that are coming up, if you are feeling like you can't bring that hope or don't want to go to the games and you've got those extra tickets, tell the people what they can do with their extra tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had our largest single game ticket donation against Sam Houston 2 nights ago, which I think is it's amazing. First off, because we had over 100 tickets donated, close to 100 folks in attendance for the game. But it's always kind of symbolic on where people are in terms of we always get a lot of tickets for non-conference games, but you can always tell how kind of a season's going when the numbers really spike. Like, for example, towards the end of the football season, usually in years past, we are drowning in ticket donations. This year, none, zero. I mean, we had a handful for Purdue, but I think the weather impacted that. But it's always kind of symbolic, but it's the main point of it is it's a great opportunity. If you can't make it, there are people that would kill to go, that would die to go. I think against Sam Houston is a great example. We sent close to 100 people to that game. A lot of local Bloomington families that never have the opportunity to go there are involved with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Clubs. I mean, it's something they don't get to do very often. So we're incredibly thankful for that. Again, if you don't feel like going or can't go, especially with the holidays around the corner, consider the project, HoosierTicketProject.org. Go there and learn more about how to donate. There's a donate tab. If you are somebody or you know of somebody that could take advantage of a program like this, there's a request tab on there as well. You can make a request and request tickets to a game and tell us your story and your why, and we'll work hard to match you with some tickets. But yeah, HoosierTicketProject.org is where you can go to learn more. Thanks, Chad.
Yep. And before we move on from that and let you go and everything, just kind of maybe cap it off. Where are your thoughts? Where does Martha's head sit right now? Beyond being in that, I will say, I have to bring this up, that fantastic cutout they have of Martha with the movable arms for the student section. That looked fantastic. Hopefully that stands well.
I know. I need one of those just for home use. I think that was incredible. I like that. Where am I at? I mean, I keep thanking you this morning. I'm thankful that we delayed even. I needed a couple days after Atlantis. I think about Thanksgiving and having to watch. I can't remember if it was Gonzaga or Wisconsin. I'm also a Bears fan, but having to go back to back with Bears and Indiana basketball. Thanksgiving was. Thanksgiving, it was my sports temper was peaking that day, but I try to think about the last time I and this is going to sound bad, and I kind of mean it kind of in a vacuum and in the moment here, but it seems kind of painful to watch this team play in stretches at times. It's like, man, this just, even when things are going well, it just seems like it's a lot harder than it should be. When I think back to, I'm trying to think of like, when was the last stretch that Indiana basketball was just a fun program, fun to watch? And you think about, some of those cream teams and those Big Ten championships where it just feels like they couldn't miss. There were just games that you were like, you just knew. There's also games that went the other way too, but it's just, everything just seems so forced and so difficult with this team right now. And they've got to just find a way to play a little bit of loose basketball. And I think part of that's just shifting the lineups. And I know your question is where am I at? And I'm like, I'm always going to be invested in Indiana basketball. I'm a little bit apathetic right now because I've just got this sense that I know how this could and may end. I mean, it doesn't seem any different than the last couple seasons right now to me, but I'm a prove me wrong type of guy as well. Like, and I think that's where my hope comes from, is that I hope to be proved wrong. I will gladly eat crow. So I'm not going to go out there and dog the team publicly much. I may complain in the moment when things are going bad, but I'm not going to sit here and say fire Mike Woodson or do this, do that, do the other. I'm going to lead with hope too. But right now I've got a bit of apathy too, my man. It's frustrating because we've seen this the last couple of years and there's nothing indicative of change. The talent's there. So right now it's just a prove me wrong type mentality, but the stage is there. The schedule's there. The road is there. Like, please go out and prove me wrong. I'm begging you, prove me wrong, because you've got some Big Ten opponents coming up. Go out and do something. There's a lot of season left. Go out and prove a lot of people wrong, please. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that's the way to be. And it's okay to feel multiple ways, and it's okay to have trepidation. It is what it is to be an Indiana fan. We're an educated fan base. We're a high standards fan base. And we haven't had that. And I think because we haven't had that in such a long time, and we haven't felt that in such a long time, that is equally why we are the way we are right now. We are impatient. We are impatient for success. We have tasted success on the football field. We have tasted it on a program that has been bad for a long time and historically rough, and now is being successful. To want that for our sport that we have always loved, that we have had generations that have felt that success, and now we are the next generation of fan, and we want to feel that as well. We want to hang that banner. And I think that leads over as well to the hope side of it. And I think maybe it's a little self-serving to lead so much with that hope, because I am a person watching from so far, but yet want to be ingrained and a part of it so much that I do this podcast, and that I pull you in, Martha, with me to do these podcasts. And it's something, again, that I do not making a bit of money and actually costing money to host it and do different things for this podcast. But it's that love for the sport and that hope for success and where this program could, and rightfully so, should be, that I will continue to stand by. I will continue to tune in. I will continue to force my hands into a clasp when I want to reach for that remote and turn off the game. And I will continue to drag myself down here into my basement in the mornings after the games, despite not wanting to talk about these games, and spend that hour before I get on with you guys to gather my notes and figure out how I'm going to talk about a horrible effort by this team, but hope for a positive game and a successful game to be able to talk to you guys and celebrate this Indiana program. So yeah, and maybe that's where I employ you. If you are a fan that is close to IU, if you are a season ticket holder that is listening to this right now, to stick with it, fight through it. Don't get daunted. Let's try to stay undaunted with this team and lead with that positivity, lead with that hope. That's where I implore you. I'm not saying to put aside your standards. I'm not saying to not voice your disapproval, but don't beat it with a dead horse, like a dead horse. Don't pile it on so much. Try to not be a boo bird as we get on, because that can just pile on like heavy snow does on the road. That just makes things worse. So let's try to be good. Let's try to be positive. I know that's hard. I know it's a huge ask. I know it's big to say that. It's another thing to live that. But thank you guys for being here, at least with this show, and tuning in with Martha and I and everything. And yeah, let's go Hoosiers. Next game coming up for IU is this Friday against Miami of Ohio. It is a home game, so get there if you can. 7 p.m. It is on Big Ten Network. So hopefully we carry over some good things from this game. Hopefully we see some more one big lineups in there. Hopefully Goody continues to make those three. Hopefully Leo continues to be improved. Hopefully Rice continues his forward trajectory and builds that confidence that we like to see from him, and those other things continue. But for now, that will do it on this edition of Hoosier Morning After. Thank you for being with me. Thank you, those of you listening live on Twitter, on YouTube. If you're there on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that thumbs up. If you're watching on Twitter, please subscribe to myself at General Chadwick on Twitter, and Martha as well at the Mop Lady. There you find more information about the show, when we're going to go live and all that. And a thank you to you as well if you're listening on the different podcast streams. I appreciate you. We will be back again the morning after the next show. And until then, guys, you go out there, have yourselves a wonderful day. And
as always, go Hoosiers.
Thank you, guys.